Welcome to Fashion and Fiction Fun. I'm your host, Wendy Kendall. The result of my love of fashion, and especially my passion for purses, mystery, and romance, are the books that I've authored in the intriguing In Pursuit mysteries. Cat Out of the Bag introduces Catherine Watson, purse designer and sleuth. As Kat moves from designer bags to body bags, she's uncovering clues to a murder. The prequel, Pistachio Makes a Splash, delves into a chilling cold case. It's then followed by the finalist for Best Romantic Suspense at Killer Nashville, Snow Kiss Cookies to Die For. That creates a tangle of mystery and love and raises suspicions about Desiree's romantic new sweetheart, Leo. A summer read that will keep you on the edge of your beach towel, Cherry Shakes in the Park. It blends danger, divas, and frothy delights. And ribbons of love run through the heart of Christmas cookies and dreams. I also enjoy investigating the Pacific Northwest, which is where I live, and you can sleuth a trail of clues to my activities as a blogger, YouTube podcaster, speaker, project manager, and syndicated columnist on my website, wendywritesbooks.com. Today, I'm tuning up for a noteworthy interview in Pursuit of Fashion and Fiction with Erica Miner, violinist turned author. Erica Miner now has a multifaceted career as an award-winning author, screenwriter, journalist, and lecturer. A native of Detroit, she began her studies of violin with the Boston Symphony Orchestra concertmaster, Joseph Silverstein, at Boston University, and that's where she graduated cum laude. She's performed with such celebrated conductors as Leonard Bernstein and Eric Leinsdorf. Erica went on to perform with the prestigious Metropolitan Opera Company for 21 years. Bravo! Where she worked closely with renowned maestro James Levine. Author Erica Miner's highly intuitive writing runs the gamut of genres, novels, screenplays, and articles for major arts websites. Her music, poetry, and writing reflect her own life's experiences. Taking main stage now is Erica Miner's exciting series of Julia Kogan opera mysteries. These are wonderful mysteries. They're set in striking settings and memorable characters, definitely. The entire series is being republished by Level Best Books, starting with Aria for Murder. Find out more at her website, ericaminer.com. Welcome, Erica Miner, in Pursuit of Fashion and Fiction.
Thank you, Wendy. I'm thrilled to be here, and I loved your tuning up and noteworthy references. How very musical.
Well, the last opera that I attended was one that I had hoped to see for a very long time. Oh my gosh. I saw Wagner's Tristan and Isolde. It was at the Seattle Opera just a few months ago, and I thoroughly enjoyed it. When I think of opera, visions that dance in my head include the incredible and stunning costumes that are showcased on stage with grand entrances. Can you tell us a little about what fashion is like backstage before those entrances? And how are the costumes designed and created? And in what time frame for a season's performance?
Actually, it all starts in the costume shop. The wardrobe mistress is one of the busiest company members. She and the seamstresses work year-round. They never stop. The costume director at San Francisco Opera once said, "I think one of the great things about clothes is that they really enable us to tell a story visually and emotionally." As to my experiences at the Met, I had some very close friends in the women's chorus, so I often would go up to their dressing room and hang out during intermissions. And I noticed when I was there, most of them were in various states of undress. So when you think about it, the chorus is very often not on stage, but waiting in the wings or in their dressing room. So why wait in a big, bulky costume when you can be comfortable, as it were? Sometimes the costumes are even adjusted on stage behind the curtain just moments before the curtain rises. And sometimes you have to do a costume change lickety split and split second timing. Like, for instance, in The Magic Flute, there's a scene where the men's chorus has to change from the bad guys to the good guys in 2 or 2.5 minutes backstage. So you have to understand that they hire lots and lots of extra people back there to help them get into those costumes, out of the one into the other, in time for that scene change for them to appear in the front of the stage. It's crazy back there. Also, sometimes the same costume can change during a performance. For instance, in Lucia di Lammermoor, the soprano has a wedding scene where she's wearing a pure white, snow white gown. And then later in the opera, she stabs her husband to death. And she reappears in a later scene in the same dress, except it's soaked with blood. And in Tosca, the tenor who is being dragged off stage to be tortured, when he comes back on stage, his costume is all ripped and streaked with blood. So the costume director has to take care of all those changes. Plus, they have to make sure there are enough hooks in the back of a costume, especially a woman's costume, for cast changes to allow for differences in girth, as it were. When I was at the Met, the wardrobe mistress was very enamored of the orchestra people. So she allowed us to borrow costumes for various occasions, like a costume party. And I was able to do that several times. And I remember the first time I visited one of the many vast rooms filled with costumes from former productions, literally as far as the eye could see. I was absolutely overwhelmed. And how lucky was I to wear one of those costumes? Also, costumes are a very important part of the plot in the second book in the series. Also important are costume coordinated props. There's even a costume party at the end of that book. So costumes are everything there. Now, in Santa Fe, where the second book is set, the costume director, when she found out I was writing a book that takes place at the opera, she gave me a private tour of the costume shop. And let me tell you, that space is as big as a house. It's huge. And I'm going to describe part of it in one of my readings tonight.
Looking forward
Also,
to that.
yeah, I mean, in addition to that, because Santa Fe has this very important apprentice program, they have to make costumes for the apprentices to practice in case they're understudying a role. So it's a full-time, full-year job. In the second book, Julia, the protagonist, takes a tour of the costume shop, as I did, but Julia later on spends time snooping around it, which I didn't do. At Seattle Opera, the costume shop opened quite recently in a new space. As you probably know, they built a whole opera center right next to McCaw Hall. So that costume shop is absolutely so impressive. They invited all of us journalists to take a private tour of the opera house, or of the center next to the opera house when it first opened. And I was happy to see that it was not removed from the rest of the opera house like most costume shops are. It was huge, it was open, it had like 40-foot ceilings and windows with lots of light coming in so everybody could see what they were doing. And the costume designer there told me that she works with the stage director and that the costumes reflect the themes of the opera. So for instance, if you have Verdi's La Traviata, which is a very romantic opera, then the costumes will reflect that romanticism. Or they'll show a rich person versus a poor person. Or in the case of an opera that takes place in 16th century Spain at the Spanish court, everybody's wearing these ruffled collars, these ruffs. And according to the costume designer, she said, to get across the message, don't behead me, stuff like that. She said,
Oh
also,
my goodness.
it's incredible. I never thought of this stuff. I never thought of the fact that armor can portray someone as a powerful person. It's all about the costumes. And this team works year round to make sure that those costumes, and also the hair, we'll get to that in a moment, drive the stories told on the opera stage. The costume director says, in costume design, you get to dive into the psychology of who the character is. Color, the way things are cut, are so telling in the building of the character. All these decisions are made to drive the story forward and entertain the audience. Costumes there are almost always custom tailored. People who work here have mad skills, she said. There's couture happening in Seattle, a dedicated team committed to helping actors and to help make the story shine. The cherry on top is the wig. That is the thing that solidifies the grandeur of the opera, and it takes 40 hours to build one. So in an opera with 50 wigs, imagine how long that must have taken. The cast is made of the actor's head. It's very complicated. I explain this in book 2 in great detail, but basically they make a cast of the actor's head. Then they sew individual hairs on with a tiny needle one by one. If you can imagine, I mean, the labor intensive. Also, the texture of the hair is very important. They want to make it honor the actor's own hair in every way that they possibly can. And so the actors, one of them once said, once I've put that wig on, I've become that person. It changes who you are and changes you into that character. It's so fascinating. Here's another example, dressing the women's chorus. Now, in a 19th century opera, the women wore these voluminous skirts, right? And so when you're building a costume like that, first of all, you have to make sure they can raise their arms. They have enough room to move their arms. They have to be able to breathe because otherwise they can't sing. But also the costume has to be historically correct. So for example, the hem length for the 19th century is a certain way, but also you have to make sure that the chorister's not going to trip over it. And it takes several layers to make this entire silhouette. So under this voluminous skirt, you have a hoop skirt, which consists of steel ribs connected by fabric. Then there's several layers of petticoat over that to hide the ribs and smooth over the hoop. And then you have the skirt. So it takes up so much room that the singer has to be coached in navigating the stage with that huge skirt. So imagine an entire chorus of women backstage and the navigation issues they must have. They literally have to take one entire week of tech rehearsals to practice the walkthroughs and to gauge how wide the walkways are. Bottom line, it takes a small army to get costumes ready for a production, not to mention the accessories, the gloves, the hats, and of course, the purse.
That is amazing. Wow, thanks for walking us through that. I had no idea how much. Well, fashion is just, fashion makes the character. You're right.
Yeah.
It definitely does. Well, as a violinist at the Metropolitan Opera, what was your preferred dress? Were there specific requirements for what you could wear? And what was your go-to outfit? And did you have any accommodations to your fashion in a desire for comfort or to accommodate your musical instrument? And of course, where did you put your purse while you were working and playing?
Great questions. So as opposed to the men, now the men have it very easy. Either they wear a tuxedo at night or a dress suit for matinees, but the women are required to wear all black. So it gives us a little leeway, but it's also very monotonous wearing all black. It's different also for a symphony orchestra who's on the stage versus in the opera pit where the audience doesn't really see you that much. And opera performances are much longer than symphony, so comfort is a very major consideration. So pants were generally the norm for most of us. We also lobbied the management to have some variation. So in other words, for example, to wear a white blouse under a black jacket, just for a little less boring, to say the least, to make it less monotonous. As for accommodating an instrument, violinists especially and violists try to avoid a very high collar because it gets in the way of putting the violin under the chin. When I first started out, my female colleagues were very disapproving if I showed up not perfect in every way. I remember one night I wore brown shoes instead of black. The first flutist upbraided me mercilessly, and my closet at home had a whole section devoted to Black performance attire, which was varied according to style and type of material. My go-to was very soft, comfy Black pants and a knit sweater or a top that wasn't too low cut, of course. Velvet was my favorite because it was soft on the body, but also very elegant looking. I once tried wearing black leather pants in the pit. What a mistake. It was so uncomfortable. I never tried that again. Where did I put my purse? In the pit. We could pretty much put it anywhere since most of the audience couldn't see it. Sometimes I'd hang it on the back of my chair. Sometimes I'd put it in my violin case, which we could have next to us if we were in the pit, or I could leave it locked in my locker.
Got it. Okay. Well, now your amateur sleuth, Julia Kogan, also plays in the orchestra. Can you tell us a little about her, her insights into fashion, and any preferences that she has for her own personal fashion?
Well, Julia is a gifted young violinist who's about to make her debut playing in the Metropolitan Opera Orchestra. She's as meticulous about her appearance as she is about her violin playing. Toward the beginning of Aria for Murder, the night of her first performance at the Met, she checks her reflection in the huge glass windows at the front entrance of the theater to make sure she's wrinkle-free and impeccable. She wants to be fashionable and elegant, yet not draw too much attention to herself. She chooses styles that are understated but classy.
Very nice. How about telling us a little bit more about your mystery series? We haven't heard much about it at all yet. And then would you treat us to a reading from the first in the series, Aria for Murder?
With pleasure. So in book one of my Julia Kogan opera mystery series, Aria for Murder, violinist Julia Kogan is just starting out as a neophyte in the Met Orchestra. She's in awe of being able to perform at the world's most prestigious opera house, but also somewhat naive in her real-world experience. So when her mentor, a conductor, is assassinated on the podium, her carefully constructed world begins to fall apart. She takes a leap of faith to investigate and find the killer, but soon realizes she may be the killer's next victim. In the end, Julia discovers an inner strength she didn't know she had, and that's what allows her to survive. So in book two, Julia goes to Santa Fe to be concertmaster of the opera for the summer season and finds danger lurking both inside and outside the opera house, which is an outdoor theater. The mysterious setting of Santa Fe allows for much intrigue and surreptitious activity. For instance, did you know there are supposedly more ghosts in Santa Fe than anywhere else in the US? In book three, Julia heads to San Francisco Opera to take the place of their concertmaster, who has been seriously injured under mysterious circumstances. As Julia unravels the reasons why, she becomes entangled in multiple murder investigations. All in all, in this series, I set out to prove that opera can kill you.
Great.
Now for the reading. This is from the first scene. This is after the prologue in chapter 1, when Julia is walking across Lincoln Plaza to get to the Met. Julia threaded her way through the waiting crowds of patrons in front of the Metropolitan Opera House, her violin case strapped to her shoulder. She stopped for a moment to gaze wide-eyed at the parade of celebrities being disgorged from their limos onto Lincoln Plaza and the paparazzi jostling each other to capture the ultimate photograph. This evening, the night of her first performance as a violinist with the Met Orchestra, Julia was seized by the desire to enter the opera house through the front doors on Lincoln Center Plaza, rather than the stage door artists access through the rear of the theater. The revolving glass doors overlooking the plaza afforded a much more elegant entrance, and she desperately wanted to be among the opening night glitterati. Julia gently squeezed past a chic older patron in a fox-stolen diamond necklace and inhaled the woman's heady perfume. Through the glass windows, the giant windows that revealed activity inside the Met lobby, Julia could see the distinguished cavalcade sweeping through the doors and up the circular Italian marble staircases, past the red velvet flocked walls, and underneath the famed Austrian lead crystal chandeliers. She took a moment to admire the immense, towering 40-foot Chagall murals, the signature of the Met's facade that distinguished the Metropolitan Opera House from all others. A pair of life-size glass-enclosed posters standing guard in front of the Met's massive glass doors heralded the evening's performance. Julia checked her reflection in the glass. She smoothed out a wrinkle in her V-neck black georgette blouse and was pleased to see that the cut of her black velvet pants made her petite frame look even slenderer than usual and a bit taller. As she disappeared through the revolving doors and into the Met lobby, Julia gave one last wistful glance at the opera goers ascending the elegant staircase and headed toward the stairway that led to the lower level and the alleyway where the stage door was located. Life at the Opera House appeared glamorous to the patrons and public at large, but Julia knew that she and her overworked cohorts in the Met Orchestra were just the hired help.
Oh, wow. Love it. Ah. Oh, thank you for that reading. When I go to the opera, I love to dress up from my own little costume shop. That's my closet. I love sparkly dresses, heels, jewelry, and of course, a gorgeous clutch purse that complements my dress. And I thought I would bring a couple of examples to show. Here's one. See if I can get it to sparkle in the light. A little bit. There you go. There's a good view of it. Big enough for the phone and all that.
Yeah.
And then this is another one that I like. No sparkles, but I like the jade.
Yes.
The way that looks.
That is unique.
And then this one, I inherited from my mother. And I just love the shiny, and especially the chain is just thick chain is gorgeous.
It is. And the gold is perfect for the opera.
Yes, isn't it? I think so too. Well, as you said, your books take place at different cities' opera stages. What observations do you have about the audience's fashion, both women and men, in these different cities, as you did your research for your books? And did these fashion differences impact your mystery?
Absolutely. Traditionally, an opera house was somewhere that people went to be seen as much as to see the operas themselves. Back in the day, the Met was exactly that. New York Times reviews of Met performances at the turn of the 20th century would describe more about what audience members were wearing than how well the singers performed. Toward the latter part of the 20th century, that began to change. Younger attendees, for instance, even wore blue jeans. But for opening night, that always has been an occasion for gowns, jewels, and furs. There's something uniquely special about an opening night, which is why I chose to begin Aria for Murder with one. Excitement is in the air for a whole new season. Audiences dress up. In New York, celebrities show up in droves dressed to kill. Crowds of people turn out to watch the whole scene unfold in Lincoln Plaza. There's nothing quite like it anywhere. Also, it's the only time all season when, before the curtain goes up, the orchestra stands up to play the national anthem in the pit, which of course we know by heart. It's a stirring moment, and I remember it with great nostalgia and pride. I looked forward to it every opening night. In the first scene of Aria for Murder, Julia observes the elegance of the audience members' attire. But believe it or not, in Santa Fe, New Mexico, even for an outdoor theater surrounded by mountains and chaparral, opera goers dress even more formally than the Met. The Santa Fe opera season is only in the summer, so that's the audience's only opportunity to dress up, and they do it in spades. Formal gowns, jewels, tuxes. You see people tailgating in the parking lot before the shows dressed to the nines with champagne flowing like water. All of this is reflected in novel number 2. Here in Seattle, audiences generally dress much more casually than the Met in Santa Fe. There are large contrasts between the casual and the formal. Sometimes I've even seen people wearing flip-flops. That is where I draw the line. But also here, they often dress to reflect the opera they're attending. For instance, at a performance of The Pearl Fishers, which takes place in ancient Ceylon, which is now Sri Lanka, I saw a number of women dressed in exotic, hugely colorful saris and Far Eastern style attire in the audience. Talk about getting into the atmosphere of the opera. I've never seen that anywhere else. How cool is that?
Very cool. How did you choose the operas that are being performed in your three mysteries? Are they favorites of yours? And did the costumes have any part in that decision, or did the mystery have any part in that decision?
The mystery element was definitely a main factor. In opera, art imitates life in all its drama. So, of course, for murder mysteries, I chose the most murderous operas ever. None of them are my favorites per se, but all of them are hugely violent and deadly and have major murder scenes. In the case of book number 2, however, the costume is everything. I'm a pushover for period costumes, and that certainly played a part in my choice of operas in that book. But here's something fun. In Salome, which is one of the operas in book number 2, and is also one of the bloodiest operas ever written, after the famous Dance of the Seven Veils, her costume is literally nothing at all.
Ooh, oh my,
Oh my.
oh my. um, this has been such an exciting interview. We're doing a two-part interview. So I'm inviting Erica back, and I want to make sure that everybody knows that as much as you've enjoyed part 1 of our episode, tune in for part 2, and we're going to make sure that we answer all the questions that we have. Thank you, everybody. And thank you, Erica. I'm looking forward to part 2.
My pleasure, so am I.